Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Grayzone. It's Max Blumenthal. We had a longer than usual hiatus, and there's a lot we want to talk about today. I'm going to be joined by an excellent guest. I am hoping to get this up on Rockfin. I don't even know if that works anymore. We're live on YouTube, Rumble, and Elon TV, aka Twitter X, and that will be a major topic of this discussion. It doesn't look like Rockfin even works anymore. It doesn't even, it just, the key just doesn't work anymore. So I can't go live there. I don't know who still watches there anyway. But, we had a good run. You guys need to get your act together over there. So yeah, here we are. We want to discuss so much about what's happening in Syria, Israel-Palestine, Ukraine, but closer to home, or at least closer to where I am, we are witnessing the dawn of a techno-feudal oligarchy, one that's been blossoming under administrations, both Republican and Democrat, since the bubble economy of the 90s. Honestly, since Bill Gates started writing licenses for his own company. And now it's in full bloom. And so one of the key figures in this cartel, Elon Musk, has gone mad with power in the past 2 weeks. And to discuss this development, I want to bring in Patrick Henningsen from 21st Century Wire, who has been really on point on this development. And we're also going to talk about the Cybertruck bombing and how that story was disseminated to the public through a very suspect podcast, a CIA adjacent podcast that has somehow become the #1 podcast in America. I hadn't heard of it before. So, I don't think we should waste any more time. Patrick, thanks for being with us at the Grayzone.
I appreciate it.
Anything I missed about in your bio or in the introduction?
No, that's pretty much it. People, you can find me at 21st Century Wire, at 21 Wire on X, Twitter, and the links are there.
Great. Well, I wonder if this will get somehow suppressed on Twitter X. I feel already suppressed by the new algorithm that prioritizes entertainment and deprioritizes the kind of negativity we spout on a daily basis.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about the kind of the megalomaniacal meltdown that we've witnessed through Elon Musk in the past 2 weeks. But before I do that, explain what you think the significance of Elon Musk is in the incoming Trump administration and in the transatlantic power structure.
Yeah, very interesting. Very interesting. I think the first thing you got to understand is that this has nothing to do with politics, and has definitely nothing to do with Elon being a MAGA or a conservative or anything like this. He has shown himself throughout his career to be an adept shapeshifter. He's able to wiggle into basically any political position that suits his business interests and his vision of the future, and the people who are backing him as well. And so what you have here is an interesting character who, for all intents and purposes, appeared to support Joe Biden in the last election. Yeah. I would venture to guess he was a Democrat. I would also venture to guess that he was part of Democratic bundling for fundraising. He is a huge outspoken proponent for carbon taxes. This is like one of the ultimate red flags for like MAGA. It's amazing how they had amnesia on this. And he basically has been courting the billionaire Democratic donor class for the last decade to buy Tesla as a status symbol. You live in the Beltway, Max, so it has been a status symbol for a long time in Washington to drive a Tesla for a certain type of person. with certain type of policy. So Elon Musk was all behind all of that, and he is a World Economic Forum acolyte. He is a technocrat. He is the grandson of the founder of Technocracy Inc. So the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And so he is a globalist, an arch globalist, a technocrat. His vision of the future is an automated one. He is one of the biggest drivers right now on robotics and seeing robots replace humans in the workforce. No talk about this, of course, on the campaign trail. It is all, MAGA, make America great again. So he's kind of in the same way, Max, I don't know if you can understand this metaphor, but in the same way that George Soros had fashioned himself as a liberal all those years, and Elon Musk has fashioned himself recently as a conservative, but both of them are basically two sides of the same coin. And Elon Musk is now getting into the nation building business, and he's throwing his money, threatening to throw his money, trying to swing elections, as we'll talk about in Europe, by dangling cash in exactly the same way George Soros did. And he's as big as you saw how he was with the Venezuelan elections.
Yeah.
And on Bolivia. And he is, if something like this happened in Argentina, you better believe he'd be front and center. So he is a regime change person. So he's a neoliberal. I would say an extreme neoliberal.
Yeah.
Musk. And so this doesn't, he doesn't like to talk about any of this stuff at the moment because it's not very convenient. And now you're seeing a darker side, which is this kind of extreme right wing, aligning himself with the real gutter of the extreme right, which is Tommy Robinson. And who's behind Tommy Robinson? Well, we only have to kind of look at the types of people that are amplifying each other's tweets right now on this issue of the mass rape of Britain, Muslim grooming gangs. Tommy Robinson's a journalist trying to make him like a Julian Assange type martyr. It's Bill Ackman. It's Elon Musk. It's Barry Weiss. It's the entire Israeli lobby, Hezbollah machine. All basically, it's that WhatsApp group. You remember the Washington Post reported on that?
Yeah.
This is
50 billionaires.
Israel Current Affairs, I think the name of the group was.
Yeah.
That's what this is. So this is an issue, and he's hoisting himself by his own petard because he just tweeted out a fake image about a fake list of MPs that he attributed to people who were basically blocking deportation of rapists. And no, it was from the Windrush scandal. Totally different context.
Right.
Actually a reverse meaning of what he intended it to. I mean, he
got community noted by his own site.
He did. That's embarrassing.
This meltdown started like about 2 weeks ago. It started in late December, and it started through the Twitter account of Elon Musk's colleague or right-hand man in Doge, which is named after the meme coin that Elon Musk, boosted for a while. Vivek Ramaswamy. And what is Doge? It's the Department of Government Efficiency. So you'd think they'd be trying to force a Pentagon audit. They've missed 6 audits, trillions of dollars missing, reduce the Pentagon budget, cut out all the duplicates. Zelensky was even complaining that 175 billion was budgeted for Ukraine and only half of it got there because the contractors took the rest. You would think they'd be going after that. Instead, they're going for the Consumer Protection Bureau, which returns money the credit card industry steals and banking industry steals from consumers back to consumers. That's their main target. Vivek Ramaswamy's class position gets challenged. And here's how he responds. And I think this is so emblematic of everything we're going to talk about. He talks about, the reason top tech companies often hire foreign-born and first-generation engineers over, quote, Native Americans isn't because of an innate American IQ deficit. It comes down to culture. And he's basically saying that the culture he comes from, the Indian Hindu culture, is superior to the black and white culture of Americans who've been here for hundreds of years, who support Donald Trump. And that culture, what he's talking about, venerates mediocrity over excellence. And it celebrates the prom queen over the math Olympiad, the mathlete, the nerd, the jock over the valedictorian. And it's not producing good engineers. And he complains about Saved by the Bell, that it venerates Zack and Slater over Screech. Of course, Vivek is the superior Hindu Screech, and Stefan over Steve Urkel in Family Matters. Basically, over Revenge of the Nerds, by the way, never happened in Hollywood. I guess he missed that one. But basically, he's saying white people are kind of like culturally retarded, and just goes off on all the people who elected Donald Trump and put Vivek where he was. This is a guy who is pandering to them, but as soon as he feels challenged, he calls them culturally inferior and says, this can be our Sputnik moment. We have to stop basically having sleepovers and start turning our kids into mathletes and forcing them to get up and study and go to Kumon at 7 a.m. on Saturday. But until then, the tech industry should get all the H-1B visas it wants to drive salaries down and replace American citizen workers with workers imported specifically from India. That's what the argument is. And it's one that Elon Musk vigorously supported when this post, which was like the most tone deaf post I've ever seen on Twitter. It was like almost more tone deaf, just more politically damaging to the person who posted it than that white lady who posted, I'm going to Africa, hope I don't get AIDS, right before her plane took off. I don't know if all of you remember that. That's like vintage old school Twitter. But it was so damaging. He came in for so many attacks from all the MAGA influencers. Because why did they elect Trump? They want less immigration. And here's a guy running Doge with Elon Musk who wants more immigration to basically replace American workers with cheaper workers so tech barons can make more money. That's basically what it's about.
I thought you were reading from a parody account there.
Yeah.
For a minute, that was incredible. So it's very disingenuous by Vivek, because it's Vivek like cake, as he himself instructed us to pronounce his name correctly. Vivek like cake. Vivek basically is disingenuous because if you look at the numbers in terms of average salaries of domestic tech managers and those that are imported via the H-1B system, it's about 20 to 30% less for the imports. So, I mean, there's clearly an economic incentive. And if you look at the amount of layoffs from Silicon Valley companies in the last 12 months, clearly there's a lot of unemployed people that are qualified in tech. You only have to speak to your own peer group of people who've applied to some of these jobs and weren't able to get them to know that there are plenty of qualified, skilled, and brilliant people in our own country that can fill these positions, and they're innovative and everything else. It really comes down to money at the end of the day. But this is the issue that has set off Elon Musk and this whole distraction. You're seeing a massive gaslighting operation as well. And Elon does this, he reacts. And whenever he gets caught out or stuck in some kind of an undertow, in this case, it's the undertow of the tech bros, because MAGA base is looking at Peter Thiel, Alex Karp, Vivek Ramaswamy, Elon Musk, and thinking, did you guys just buy your way into the White House? Because it kind of looks like you did.
No, it's a meritocracy.
$100 million can buy you a lot of merit in the political system. So like that kind of it's very embarrassing. And to me, this was a five-alarm fire for MAGA. And so Elon basically, and Bill Ackman and all these people, they mobilized to create this massive distraction, the rape of Britain. And a lot of this is just, and this, I personally, Max, I even go further, that all of this crazed talk of basically conquering Greenland, changing the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, and then conquering Canada, that a lot of this is to basically activate the MAGA base, the QAnon wing of the MAGA base, because that's really who the tech bros have basically stepped over on this, is the QAnon wing of, and so that's what's going on. And Elon Musk is the ringmaster of this because he's in charge of the biggest social media platform on the planet. So, and he's got his thumb on the scales of just about everything on that platform.
Yeah, he's trying to shape a very clear narrative. The mask is off. It's clear why he has Twitter X under his control. And there have been so many distractions since this contradiction was exposed. And what it really revealed was how they're trying to establish a techno-feudal oligarchy. In the US, even Steve Bannon has called this out.
Yep.
Alexander Coburn wrote a piece for Harper's about the kind of project that they're bringing into bear in Silicon Valley. And it's a caste system. It's a literal caste system, which represents writ large what they are trying to impose on the earth, where the rest of us are serfs, unless we can serve them as influencers. Andrew's piece is called The Hindutva Lobby. It's not just about Silicon Valley. I mean, it's about one of the powerful emerging lobbies in Washington, which is a force multiplier for AIPAC and the Zionist lobby, how Hindu nationalism spreads in America. But the first two paragraphs really spell out what's going on. California legislators approved a bill banning discrimination on the grounds of caste, defined in the bill as an individual's perceived position in a system of social stratification on the basis of inherited status. Caste is a central feature of life for hundreds of millions of people in India and beyond. The measure had been championed by California's Dalit community. Once known as untouchables, Dalits occupy the bottommost rung of the Hindu hierarchy, and they've traditionally been confined to menial occupations on the fringes of Indian society purely by virtue of their birth. Dalits in California report that the ancient system has been imported to the United States, where it remains prevalent in the Indian diaspora, including among those in the tech industry. They say that in California, this doesn't exist, declared the measure's sponsor, Aisha Wahab, state senator. If it doesn't exist, then why do we have so many people advocating for the need of this bill? There's a long parenthetical. Despite furious opposition from leading figures in California's Hindu tech community, by September, the measure had passed both House and Senate with overwhelming bipartisan majorities and was sent to Governor Gavin Newsom for his signature. While Newsom deliberated, Dalit activists waged a month-long hunger strike outside the legislature. Then in October, Newsom announced that he was vetoing the bill. It was unnecessary, he claimed, because any discrimination was covered by existing civil rights laws. And it goes on to basically note that a key figure who is donor to the Biden Victory Fund, Ramesh Kapoor, who is a wealthy Massachusetts businessman, donated a massive amount of money to Newsom to kill that bill banning caste-based hiring in the tech industry. And Patrick, before I get your response, here's Elon Musk's response to the criticism that he receives. This is a guy who is pushing a tidal wave of anti-Muslim racism on Twitter right now about Pakistani rape gangs. He's a guy who follows pro-apartheid accounts in South Africa as a paid subscriber. I mean, his views are very familiar to everyone watching this. But here's what he said to the MAGA base, the people who elected Trump, who are realizing, or maybe they don't realize that, that they have, been played by the P.T. Barnum rule of politics. The contemptible fools I'm referring to are those in the Republican Party who are hateful, unrepentant racists. He's calling the Trump base racist and saying they will absolutely be the downfall of the Republican Party or if they are not removed, simply because they challenged his bottom line, which is contingent on massive amounts of H-1B visas, which are exploited by employment agencies in Silicon Valley to undercut skilled American labor. This is amazing. I mean, this is a huge mask off moment.
And you see below, if you go back to that tweet, Matt.
Oh yeah,
you see the reply.
Ian Miles Chong,
who's one of his paid surrogates from Malaysia, who's America First paid surrogate now, or something like that. It's kind of funny, but calling him subtards. I mean, he has.
This is a guy who gets paid to, like, if any black person does anything wrong in the U.S., he will like zero in like a laser on them, or any migrant. But now he's against racism from Malaysia.
Musk, there's an interview with his oldest child, I believe, who basically said that Musk said, don't talk Arabic. That's the language of the enemy. Okay. So to his own child. That's reported, by the way, in multiple Huffington Post, mainstream media outlets. So there's an issue there. Elon has, I think, extreme racist tendencies. That's my personal read on it. The fact that he has embraced Tommy Robinson, who himself is a known, he's a career criminal and a known race hustler in the UK. People in the UK know all about Tommy Robinson. But
Yeah.
no one in America really understands, because they've created a whole mythology that he's a journalist who's being imprisoned for exposing Muslim rape gangs, which is
Yeah.
a total lie. Tommy Robinson's in jail for contempt of court, multiple contempts of court. And the irony is, the issue that he's most in the dock for was defamation claims made of his supposedly most famous documentary that he uses to tout his journalistic bona fides. It's the one thing that got him in prison, because it's so bad in terms of journalism. Tommy defamed a Syrian refugee named Jamal, who's a young man, and he tried to get a scoop for his right-wing mob, and he ended up, basically, it backfired. And instead of backing off, he doubled down, and that landed him in prison. So Elon Musk is basically pushing the outright lie, as is Jordan Peterson and the other people in this kind of gaggle of convenient right-wing influencers, which are really, at the end of the day, Israeli influencers or Israeli interest lobby influencers, because Tommy Robinson's been sponsored by Israeli money and Zionist money for all of his career, pretty much. So this isn't like, this is before Ezra Levant and, Rebel Media in Canada, way before that. In fact,
Yeah.
when he was at the EDL, the English Defense League, which Tommy was the head of from 2009 to 2013, originally it was listed, the EDL's corporate status was previously the Jewish Defense League.
Right.
And so there was a Jewish branch of the English Defense League, which I believe is Rabbi Kahane in America, who's an
a
FBI.
Kahanist rabbi from
Yeah.
California was one of the founders, along with a Gentile woman, I think, named Roberta Combs.
That's right.
Basically, what the EDL, the English Defense League, was when Tommy Robinson took it over, it was previously the British National Party. It was traditional far-right British politics. They didn't really, they were basically anti-Jewish, and they were a whites-only party under Nick Griffin. And then the EDL comes out, and they look the same. The aesthetic is still there, combat boots, bomber jackets, shaved heads, and they're waving Israeli flags, and they suddenly have a lot of money, and the Zionist movement is supporting them, and they join hands with Israel, and specifically the Greater Israel Project of the settler movement, to push Israel as the bulwark against the Muslim invasion of Europe. And that's where Tommy Robinson comes in. And Elon Musk was turned. Remember when he went after the ADL?
Yeah, ban the ADL hashtag, and then he made a comment about Jewish influence in the pushing the Great Replacement theory, why they themselves are promoting immigration. It was in a comment thread. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And that was the thing that he stepped in the trap, and he then gets dragged by the ear to Israel by Ben Shapiro and.
No, he got dragged to Auschwitz with Ben Shapiro.
Okay. And
I mean, that's almost as bad as going to Auschwitz with the German military.
Well, so he
having to go somewhere on a plane with Ben Shapiro is like.
And a rabbi that whose family business sells sex toys, the
Shmuley Botiach.
So imagine you're the richest man in the world, and you have no power to the extent that you get dragged across the world for struggle sessions and cop propaganda tours in Israel and also in Auschwitz. I mean, this is ridiculous. But this is the position Elon Musk got himself into, because he himself, his politics and his understanding of nuance in politics must be so based, and so simple-minded, that he gets caught and then he has to react and overcompensate. And he's done this multiple times.
Yeah.
And so it's incredible where he's ended up compared to where he was, just not so long ago.
Yeah, I have this story I was going to address. I don't know if we'll have time to, but I just and you, by the way, I put on screen David Miller's piece about Tommy Robinson and the English Defense League and how it really reflects the Zionist movement influencing far-right politics in the UK and creating chaos across the country for their own interests. And it's been attacked by the very same Israel lobby it targets. But I think that piece, if you want some great background on Tommy Robinson, read that piece by David Miller at the Grayzone. I just dropped a piece at the Grayzone containing internal emails by the Center for Countering Digital Hate, which is like the top counter disinformation group in the West right now. It came out of nowhere. Started in London. They kneecapped all of Jeremy Corbyn's allies. It was run by someone named Imran Ahmed, who is a consultant to like the conservative neoliberal Labor Party wing that destroyed Corbyn. And they moved to Washington, start attacking anyone who questions the Biden COVID response, gets them booted off Facebook. They're clearly part of the Biden administration, but outsourced. And then they start targeting Elon Musk and Twitter, trying to get, and they get exposed. Emails get exposed by Paul Thacker and Matt Taibbi, which show that they had a plan to kill Elon Musk's Twitter. So Elon goes to war with them, and Trump's allies, Stephen Miller, going to war, like all out war right now with the Center for Countering Digital Hate, accusing them of violating foreign agent registration laws because they're close to Keir Starmer and the Labor Party. I show through leaked internal emails that Imran Ahmed was working hand in glove with the Israeli embassy in DC. They were introducing him to friendly philanthropists, and that he was basically having them vet reports calling for Facebook to take down pro-Palestine accounts. It's explosive, and it shows that he's acting as a foreign agent. Elon Musk would never touch this about his mortal enemy, because Elon Musk, he's the richest man in the world. There are clearly more powerful forces that are guiding him. And he is it just feels like, just like Mark Zuckerberg getting rid of the fact checkers, that he just takes on a persona that conforms to whoever's in power.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can see how he's pushed and nudged. And, when I see him tweeting the same thing Bill Ackman's tweeting, the same thing at the same time that Barry Weiss at the so-called, free press or whatever thing is, and another shapeshifter as well politically there. But and to see all these people basically on point, Jordan Peterson, all of these influencers, the Daily Wire crowd. So they're running this campaign in concert, and they think that the public hasn't worked this out yet. They think that there's people are just so stupid on his own platform they haven't worked. Everybody's kind of worked it out. And it's a huge it's a huge L for Elon, because Tommy Robinson is a damaged brand, that's known, and everything he touches, it's like a curse. Everybody goes down with some sort of problem, and they end up having to distance themselves from him. He's toxic, but he is an important asset for the reasons which you just outlined, Max, which is this alliance between Israel and the extreme right, which has been going on for decades. This is a long-term project. And the idea is to push talking points like, to make it a clash of civilizations. If you look at Jordan Peterson's rhetoric now, it's almost like extreme clash of civilizations, almost like borderline kind of extreme Nazi kind of rhetoric, in that we can't live together. There's a problem with Islam. All of the disingenuous argument that people like Peterson and other people make in this crowd is that there's no democracies in the Islamic world. There's 80% undemocratic countries. There's something genetically wrong with these people and this administration. They're ignoring the fact that the United States and its allies have smashed every potential democratic country, an Arab nationalist country, secular country in the region, including recently Syria, and then propped up all of the Gulf autocratic monarchies. And so this doesn't come into the intellectual presentation of the Dr. Jordan Peterson. This level of nuance, of course, is not what they want to get into. But this plays into the Israeli narrative, which is that Israel is a light and is a beacon of light in a world of darkness, as Geert Wilders, one of the other members of this kind of cohort, that Israel is a good example of a Muslim-free country, and that this could be the future of the region. We need to, and they're dealing with the Muslims over there, so we need to support Israel. So this is really, to me, backing for. We're seeing this public relations campaign. You have to be very worried that this is laying the groundwork for talk of a war against Iran in the coming months, and a reboot of the war on terror. That's for sure. But it's also gaslighting, because it's removing the culpability of the U.S. and its allies in putting in essentially an Islamic State in Syria, right in the middle, on Europe's border ostensibly, and right in the middle of everything. And that the West and NATO have played and Israel played the prime role in making that happen.
Yep.
So all of this noise you're seeing, all of these distractions, to me, this is a cataclysmic historical event, what happened in Damascus. I think you'll agree as well, on a cultural, civilizational level, political stability level, and it allowed Israel to gain incredible strategic advantage over Lebanon, Hezbollah. Syria is basically not on, it's a dysfunctional state, could end up like Libya. This is historic. This is like 67, 68, 73. Nobody's talking about it. Yep. Nobody's talking about it. That, to me, is kind of what I see is what's going on here.
And here's, this relates directly to no one's talking about it. Elon Musk doesn't want anyone talking about it. When he's getting hammered and getting attacked by the people who put Trump in power, we lost Patrick briefly. Is he coming back? He changes the algorithm. Seem to have lost Patrick's picture. But here's Elon Musk stating algorithmic tweak coming soon to promote more informational, entertaining content. This is after he got hammered for calling the Trumpist base a bunch of racists, unrepentant racists, for challenging his views on H-1B visas for Silicon Valley. We will publish the changes to X English. Our goal is to maximize unregretted user seconds. Too much negativity is being pushed that technically grows user time, but not unregretted user time. I don't even know what that means, but it seems like the negativity is criticism of him, the king. The overlord who seeks to change politics according to his own whims. And if you go to like I try to avoid the For You bar at Twitter X, because it's just Elon Musk. Like every other tweet you get, no matter who you are, you're just seeing Elon make different proclamations. It couldn't be more obvious, along with his allies. And then he'll throw in a few tweets that are data mined for you based on your preferences and follows. I haven't seen much entertainment there. I have seen a lot of ads for butt enhancing jeans for men. I've seen ads for THC gummies and sex toys and other pro-family items, but I haven't seen much entertaining content. So it looks like he just changed the algorithm so no one can hear criticism of him or put the whole situation in context. And this is someone who launched Twitter because he believed in free speech. And, he bought Twitter in order to advance a free speech model, which I welcomed because, you and I, Patrick, we were toast during the last Twitter regime, which was completely run by the so-called deep state, the national security state, and all of their disinformation monitors. So I welcomed this development, but now it's becoming very clear. And it appears that Elon was banning right-wing accounts that were criticizing him or demonetizing them and preventing them from being verified as well. I don't know if that's correct, but that's what seemed to be happening. What's he up to here, changing the algorithm? And I think you're muted. Maybe I can unmute you. I can't unmute you. There you go. Still muted. I blame Starlink for muting Patrick. something with your mic. Maybe go into the audio settings. Can't hear you. So while Elon is freaking out about criticism from the MAGA base, one of his key allies who's really changed dramatically in the past few years, especially since he got hit with this obvious lawfare operation to take his money, Alex Jones, is also losing it. And it looks like he is under Elon's thumb based on what I see here.
What the hell? And he's exposing Jeffrey Epstein and the CIA. Hell, last week he put out tweets about the CIA at war with America. God almighty. Jones sold out retweeting that. God, I apologize to all of you. I'm sorry. I sold out. I tried to stop the pedophile rings, the giant Muslim kidnapping rings. I'm sorry. I kissed Elon Musk's ass. We're so close to getting the globalists. I want their throats. I want victory. And now you can see it. And you guys think you're going to harass Elon Musk and push him off of supporting Trump and divide Trump and Elon? You're not. We have already beaten your ass. Oh, let's continue. What the hell?
Yeah, I don't know if, Patrick, if your mic is working yet. Maybe use your built-in mic on your computer if you can. But that, isn't the Alex Jones that I used to know. It seems like Elon's influence and possibly his fortune is changing the face of these so-called anti-globalist commentators, because you're not going to challenge globalism working hand in glove with Elon Musk. This isn't an attack on globalism. It's about Elon. And also he looks very different. Alex Jones looks very different. And, I don't know what that is attributed to, but everything just seems to be getting exposed in Trump world as so fake, and so at odds with what with MAGA's original brand, that I think, MAGA is experiencing a kind of Obama moment with people on the left who stupidly put Obama peace sign stickers on their Toyota Priuses experienced after 2008, as Obama became the warmongering, color revolution, regime change president. Do we have your volume?
Can you hear me?
Nope.
Nope. Not sure. We might.
This is unusual. So it is highly revealing, not only that Elon Musk his allies are calling Trumpers racists, that they're actually trying to get the globalists while working with him.
Max, I just want to cut it. Max, we could actually hear Patrick there. So,
oh, really?
Yeah, we could. So you guys should continue.
Weird.
Yeah.
So why can't I hear him?
Well, let's bring him back in. Hello, Patrick.
Right. Can you hear me, guys?
We can. Turn up your volume if you can.
Okay. Yep.
And welcome, Aaron, if you want to.
Welcome and see you soon.
You want to join us?
Aaron's coming back shortly.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Testing. All right.
So yeah, after Elon Musk banned everyone, he got a major $6 billion investment from the anti-globalist bulwark at BlackRock. Major multi-billion-dollar investment in XAI in late December. This was less than 2 days later. Elon Musk started restricting and suspending verified accounts. So Patrick, welcome back. What are your thoughts?
Well, that's something called ESG. Isn't that BlackRock's governing?
Yeah, principle? At least it was.
Yeah. So yeah, that's interesting. So the big money's in there, and personally, Max, I think the bottom line is here. Long-term plan is to float X publicly, and it'll be the biggest IPO in history, possibly. It'll be something like, when they're talking about IPOing Aramco in Saudi, they're talking about, a valuation of $1 trillion, breaking all records. It'll be kind of on that level if he adds the banking and finance component. So this is important. What Elon Musk is concerned about is not quality, it's quantity, it's metrics, it's data, it's engagement, it's statistics. Just like when he says we are the media. Have you seen that, Matt?
Yeah.
Matt, he said we are the media now. So X is the #1 news source in the world. It's not. It's the #1 fake news source in the world, because he specifically made his algorithm and said this publicly. He doesn't want to put any external web links in the tweets, because then what he's done is incentivized this fake news revolution on X, where people just put a JPEG image, a breaking news headline, a kind of Mario Nafal, who's like the Daily Mail of X now.
Right.
But and at the bottom put source, type in source, Hindustan Times or something, or source some other random Twitter account, and then present this as if it's news. And these are the #1 performing accounts on X. They're the ones that get the biggest X monetization payouts per month. So Elon Musk has created, financially incentivized, a fake news ecosystem on X that dwarfs all of the fake news produced anywhere else on the internet. So X is the driver of fake and manipulated propaganda and just outright fabrication of news in the entirety of the internet. We are the media. And so what has he done? He has created a problem, and he has a solution, which he tweeted out just 2 days ago, that Grok will become the source of truth in the future. So that we are all so confused. It's like Yuri Bezmenov's, dystopian dream to get everybody confused. And then you need to rely on an AI engine. And this is what people are doing now. Let me check ChatGPT. Let me check Grok. Oh, did Grok say that? Because if Grok didn't say that, it's not really the truth. So he's dumbed down the information space. This is what Elon Musk, who is a technocrat. Technocrats provide solutions to technical problems, in this case, technical problems of their own making. And so this is what he has done. It's like the Hegelian dialectic on steroids, basically.
Yeah. And so what are your thoughts on Elon Musk's attempt to change the government in the UK, proposing that the UK actually become a state of the US, supporting the AfD, which is surging in Germany, and also pushing the annexation of Greenland? I mean, you previously made reference to this as a distraction tactic, but I also think there is something more to it. Greenland has lots of rare earth minerals. It has a lot of the minerals that Elon and other techno-feudalists lust for to create lithium batteries and various devices that require lithium batteries. And it also looks like a betrayal of anyone in MAGA who didn't want the US to just go abroad looking for monsters to slay and governments to change and territory to annex, talking about annexing Canada. Wouldn't that mean like a massive expansion of the US welfare state to accommodate Canadians who are used to kind of a social democratic welfare system? It just seems so hypocritical to me.
If they're on UBI and they have a CBDC program like the World Economic. Elon Musk is basically the main driver of Klaus Schwab's fourth industrial revolution. He is the point man for that. Okay. Firstly, but to the AfD question, that's a good place to start, Max.
Yeah.
Elon Musk dangling money in front of the AfD, as he's doing with the Reform Party. Do you know what that is? He's dangling money to not. If you look at the AfD's foreign policy positions, not hawkish at all. They want out of Ukraine. They don't want to get involved in the Middle East. So who doesn't like this? Israel doesn't like this. Okay.
Yeah.
So him dangling money is to radicalize the AfD. The AfD have spent, if you study, this is an incredibly fascinating political story, is the evolution of the AfD. They're going moderate. Okay. They might seem extreme on some issues, but generally they had to purge all of the quote anti-Semitic elements and other extreme kind of neo-Nazi elements out of the party. They spent the last 8 years doing that. and that won them seats, and it got the media off their back. They had a huge brand issue. So they've been moving in a certain direction, more populist, I would say. There's still some right-wing elements there. But if you look at Elon Musk's current political slate, it's radical and it's very pro-Zionist. And he, let's face it, he is not against any wars. He himself boasted that he provided the backbone for the Ukrainian military on the front line with Starlink. And I would even publicly ask, did Starlink provide the internet connections for HTS when they were marching to Damascus while there was a communication downage in the whole of Syria? That's a fair question, isn't it?
Great
and
question.
Is that a listed terrorist group at the time, HTS? I think it is. So are there any implications there in terms of international U.S. law, in terms of aiding and abetting a terrorist? I'm just throwing that out as a hypothetical. I don't know the answer to that question, but I think it's a fair question based on his comments about Ukraine. So, to radicalize the AFD, Britain, you can't just dissolve Parliament, okay? And the king, he's calling on King Charles to dissolve Parliament. Everyone knows in Britain the royal family's been mediatized for the last 3 decades. No, more than that, probably since right after the Second World War. So it's a vestigial, symbolic head of state. It's still part of the constitutional monarchy, but only in name only. The House of Lords under Tony Blair has been completely turned as a politicized, pay-to-play, basically, chamber of government. It's no longer a check on the Commons as it once was, much the same way how the U.S. Senate has evolved over the centuries in the United States to become something very different than it was when it started. Elon Musk has not a clue about British politics, and a lot of Britons find this highly insulting, that somebody of his stature would do something so crazy and not walk it back as a joke, that he's dead serious. I think he really has this kind of megalomania type of personality streak that is weird and really embarrassing, considering like you've got your thumb on the scale of the biggest social media platform megaphone in the world, and then he's calling for the ouster of Nigel Farage, who's hugely popular. And so if he breaks up the Reform Party, he's dangling money in front of them as well, because they're not radical enough for him.
Yep.
And so if he breaks them up, who's that going to benefit? Labor in the next general election. So the Tory party is struggling just to survive. They're on life support at the moment. But Reform is seen as the heir apparent to the Conservative Party in a coalition in the next general election. So Elon Musk is getting involved in that, and he doesn't understand the British don't necessarily like that at all. They don't like to be seen as a vassal state of the U.S., and they certainly don't want U.S. meddling in their politics. And they do have reverence and respect for their history, traditions, even if it's imperfect, even though people believe the government's corrupt here. The average Briton, even the ones who believe there's pedophile scandals up to the highest levels and so forth, they still respect the institutions. That's what makes Britain historically a great country, is it has great institutions. You see, there might be corruption as institutions, but it's understood by the population that you have to work through those issues, and it takes generations sometimes to do that. So what Elon Musk is doing is almost like spitting in the face of Britons and basically saying, well, I'll buy your country, kind of thing. Or like, I'll buy your political parties. He's like George Soros on ketamine, basically.
Or amphetamine.
Or sorry, yeah, better. Yeah, he's George Soros on amphetamines.
He had, by the way, Elon has like an obvious Mali influenced EDM track called "Don't Doubt Your Vibe," and it's like, you know, what guys in their 40s who start doing Mali do when they have like EDM producers at their disposal. He's like, you know, it all forms one clear picture of megalomania. And, you know, speaking of attempting to change the subject, there was the Cybertruck bombing, which I think is iconic, and it does symbolize where we are and where we're going. You know, I was thinking on New Year's Eve, like we are entering kind of an era of, I was thinking about Luigi Mangione, but I was thinking we're entering an era of assassinations, where in the United States, the public has lost confidence in their government's ability to reform or change anything in a way that benefits them. And there are going to be some vigilantes. There's also a major mental health crisis, and people are so addicted to social media that they're seeking notoriety. So this Cybertruck bombing, it was like an iconic moment where the ultimate kind of douche mobile blows up in front of Trump Tower. And Elon tries to spin it to, I think, change the discussion and to sell his truck.
Yeah.
I don't have the Elon tweet, but this is by one of Elon's fanboys. A bomb went off in the Cybertruck's bed, and the tires didn't pop, deflate. The exterior of the truck is intact. The bed door is still attached. Steel exterior helped contain the blast. It's the toughest and most badass truck ever made. It also happened to be true that Matt Livelsberger, who went by Matt Berg, who is a former Green Beret from the 10th Division Special Forces, somehow didn't make a very good bomb. It looked like he just whipped some fireworks together with one fuse. And it blew up straight up in the air and didn't do much damage there, except to him, apparently. Yeah.
So he's fused into the dashboard because of high temperatures, and the best Elon can do is, that's a badass fucking truck, man. I mean, it's how far do you want to go on conspiracy theories? But what if the battery exploded and there were fireworks in the back? I mean, that's not a very good story, is it? I mean, because the batteries do explode sometimes. That's just one of my far-flung conspiracy theories. But that really kind of shows you the level that people are playing at, including Elon Musk on this. And it's the age of assassinations. We've been here before as well. And often in the age of assassinations, the elite mix with the gutter. Look at Charles Manson, and look at all the Sharon Tate murders.
And
terrorism as
the years of lead in Italy is also what I'm thinking about, where radical seeming violence is actually instrumentalized to create a sense that the public, to create panic among the public, so that they close ranks with the establishment just out of fear of what the left or far right could bring.
That's what Operation Gladio was.
Operation Gladio.
Just that, basically, yeah.
And we haven't, we don't know much about Luigi Mangione, honestly. Like it's like he's sort of been disappeared, sort of also like the drone story. But Matt Livelsberger, we've learned so much about him, and we know everything about his internet history. He apparently appeared in a History Channel show. And, I don't want to speculate about the bombing or the motives for it without any hard evidence. But I think the story here that so many people are missing, that you didn't miss, I think you nailed it on Twitter and in your commentary, Patrick, is who the manifesto or the alleged manifesto by the Cybertruck bomber was leaked to. And it was leaked to someone who is also, I think, a Green Beret, 10th Division, named Sean Ryan. And this is who somehow now suddenly has the #1 podcast in America after he appeared on Joe Rogan. And he's a former CIA contractor. Like, he lists it in his bio. And the whole interview with this guy, here's the tweet where they introduced the
Sam Schumat is the name
Sam
of
Schumat,
who's another kind of
CIA guy,
forces and intel guy. So it's like the Intel Bros kind of podcast circuit. Sean's a Navy SEAL, a former Navy SEAL. That's a very marketable commodity, of course, as you know. CIA contractor. I'm not sure if I'd want to put that on my resume, but there it is. It's on there as well, CIA contractor. So yeah, and so they've laundered this story, and this is the main outlet for this story.
Yeah,
it's a closed loop if you think about it. And the email in question, Matt, and I'd like to get your comment on this, because that's actually a point of contention. Is the image they put out for the email had squiggly marks and a cursor on it, which means that they either it was in edit mode or they had copied and pasted the content. And lo and behold, Sean Ryan, to exculpatory to give an exculpatory narrative. He ran a Twitter space after this disaster of an interview, and he basically said, "Oh, we copied it into Apple Notes so we could redact the names." And I'm like, I've handled quite a few emails just on the publishing side, and that's not how you redact names.
Yeah, you can just black out the names like we do it constantly at the Grayzone.
And you can use Adobe PDF Maker even to do something that simple if you want. So it's pretty standard. And if you look at how the industry standard for emails is, it will be some kind of a digital shot of the full view of the email, plus you have to include the header and the HTML and the meta information, and you can make that downloadable. That makes it authentic. That's a legal standard to go into court, even as a piece of evidence, right? So they didn't do any of that. They haven't even published the email properly, and they've just put out little breadcrumbs on social media. So I kind of criticized them for that, and he didn't even publish it on his website. So then they say the FBI have it, but what do the FBI have? Your Apple Notes JPEG, or do we? I mean, so what's Max? The issue here is this: they're LARPing as journalists, and for a national story, and they can't even do student 101 level handling a basic email, and to some kind of a digital standard that makes it credible. And then he got angry that people were criticizing them and started, slagging off the public and the audience for questioning their motives and stuff like that. It's nothing to do with that. It's journalism. But these people want to do journalism without calling themselves journalists. And when I challenged one of their colleagues on this, on a Twitter space, an X space, he basically lashed back at me. He said, they're not journalists. They don't have to adhere to that standard because they're not journalists. They're podcasters.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Which I thought was...
They're also CIA adjacent podcasters who just non-organically became the #1 podcast, and they just lie and make stuff up constantly, and it all goes in one direction, which is the direction of supporting the MIC and the intelligence apparatus. They have this whole, just watch this, and this will, if you haven't seen them before, this is like the vibe of the show all the time. So Sean Ryan and this guy Matt Shoebox, or what's his name?
Sam Schumatt.
Sam Schumatt. They pivot from the supposed ISIS attack in New Orleans, ISIS being the mortal enemy of Iran, to allege that Iranian manpads are somehow coming across the border to take down civilian planes in the US. And millions of people are watching this. And then here's where Sean Ryan takes it.
To deal with it in their communities. There are deputies in New Orleans who put in requests for training on how to take care of a threat like this. And those fucking requests were denied. They were denied. And so what I basically want to say is it's going to be a bloody 2025. I think that's very obvious. And so for those of you that are looking for something to do and if finally come to the realization that our government is failing us, here's what you need to do. You need to get with your local communities. You need to, especially schools. Schools are very vulnerable no matter how many active shooters we have in the schools. The infrastructure that's been put in, which is minimal to none. A lot of schools still have none. You better start holding your schools accountable, and you better start raising hell and having them upgrade security no matter what the cost, because no matter what the cost is, it's not gonna amount to the loss of life that we will potentially see throughout the United States. And start calling your congressmen, get these guys to do something. Start calling your senators, get these guys to do something. They have been warned for over a year that this is coming, and nobody wants to take it seriously. Nobody wants to take it seriously. No matter where you're watching Sean.
So, I mean, in between like hawking various like pills and keto products
and phones
phones.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. The secure phones. They like Sean Ryan. He always is like, I heard from my buddies through Humans and SIGINTs and the 3-letter agencies that we got some threats coming down the pike, and we got spec ops. So we got Iranian manpads coming across the border, and then he goes like this. He goes, the government's doing nothing about it. These deputies haven't been trained. There's no, there's no armed guards at the schools. And it's clear like he's prepping the ground for some new war on terror type event. And he's urging everyone to lobby their members of Congress to basically increase the military budget. That's where this all goes. And then he brings on this CIA spotter lady. What's her name?
Targeter. What's it? A CIA targeter.
CIA targeter.
I've not heard that title before, but
neither
I'm
have
not
I.
in the spec up community, so I wouldn't know.
Sarah Adams.
Sarah Adams.
Yes. Why would the two operational heads of both these groups go get the permission of Iran? So anyway, so a lot of the people they're training in these 30 camps in Afghanistan are going there.
She's looking down at her notes, by the way.
10,000 to meet this request from Iran. Okay.
Iran.
So that's a huge chunk.
Wow.
The other biggest thing they're working on is the Fatah war plan. I don't know if you've heard about this.
I haven't.
Okay. So this is Al-Qaeda, Taliban, Al-Qaeda, Indo subcontinent, the India Al-Qaeda, and then basically a political group in Pakistan called JUIF. It's run by a guy named Fazl Rahman. Okay. So all these entities have come together and they made a war plan. And the war plan basically is to take over what's kind of called Pashtunistan. So you're going to take over the federally administrated tribal areas of Pakistan. You're going to take over Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, so the old Khyber province. And then they want to take over Baluchistan province. So this is Al-Qaeda's biggest personal plan. And so their war plan and their Fatah war planning is, like I said, number 2 after the Syria, Iraq deployments. So they have, like I said, other ambitions, right? The Bin Laden thing, even the Africa stuff, they've basically been like, they made a plan for it, and we can discuss it later, but they're like, here's your plan, Africa, you run with it and do it, because we are.
I mean, it's like, where is this coming from?
How many troops does Al-Qaeda have? Like they have 500,000 mobilized or something? How are they going to pull off a forefront war? That's and do all the attacks on U.S. schools and all our airports and I don't know. It's quite ambitious.
Yeah. Here's another.
You want to know what's funny about that one, Max, is that she was talking up the Haqqani network.
Yeah.
After the show on one of those spaces, and that's a U.S. created, CIA funded, trained operation, basically. And she's saying how we got to look out for the Haqqani network. They're teaming up with Al Qaeda. I mean, this is all like retread stuff from like 20 years ago or something, like Northern Alliance.
Watch this. I mean, this is the fakest thing I've ever seen.
There's no difference between Taliban and Al-Qaeda. Their ideology is identical. They're two sides of the same coin. They both want the same thing.
The message I deliver to you, the people of America.
When they look at America, they don't see the United States of America.
We will not stop fighting. We will not put down our weapons until we reach your lands.
They see the Islamic States North America province, the Islamic States Latin American province, the Islamic States European province.
And we put the black flag on top of the White House.
Just like Afghanistan to them is the Islamic States Khorasan province, ISKP, what you call it.
We put the black flag on the White House. And you gave me life.
Will destroy you.
That was a Mexican accent. That's like Cheech and Chong type. So that was Guido. That might have been one of their sources. Guido.
That was one. Was that one Guaido?
Guido. Literally, this guy. One of their sources is Guido. One of their. And so it's a Latino guy for sure. But he's wearing a Pashtuni goat herder's hat.
Yeah, and he says he's an Afghan American veteran.
That's
and Sean Ryan's like, we have the most badass warriors on this show every week. We got a guy from Afghanistan who's going to tell you what's really going on.
Yeah. I mean, these guys are so desperate to be back in work again because a lot of these people made all their bank during the war on terror. And they're so upset that we got, the U.S. got booted out of Afghanistan in such dramatic fashion that they think that's a wrong that needs to be corrected. And at the moment, all those guys in that community are talking up Afghanistan. And they say the Taliban is mobilizing cells in America. So you know where this is heading, basically.
Yeah, well, I think it's really important to expose this fraudulent CIA adjacent podcast because it really shows us where things are going under Trump and specifically under Mike Waltz, NSC director, because they want to hype up a new ISIS Al-Qaeda threat, not in Syria where ISIS, the Islamic State in suits, has taken over the government because they've pledged to be friendly or non-aggressive towards Israel and the U.S. occupation in northeastern Syria, which was justified on the basis of preventing ISIS from coming back, though they haven't done an anti-ISIS operation in who knows when. ISIS is holed up in the Al-Hul camp. They want to use the specter of ISIS to continue to militarize the US, impose more mass surveillance on us, including through the Starlink system and the Tesla system, which was used for surveillance to identify the supposed Cybertruck bomber, but also to expand the US military footprint in Africa, across Central and West Africa, where French and Western NATO troops are being kicked out, and in Central Asia, as well as Latin America. That's what this is all about. So this show is like one of the top psyops, and they had Pete Hegseth on, the incoming defense secretary, if he gets confirmed. They had him on recently to rant against DEI in the military. They're close to the possible next defense secretary, and they're running this giant propaganda ploy for a new war on terror, and they are complete fraudsters to the point where I would even question what this lady actually did in the CIA. Look at what Sean Ryan said he did before he blew up. He said that he was a drug trafficker.
Oh, okay.
Former SEAL said he was a drug trafficker. He was on Megyn Kelly's show. I'd built quite the drug trafficking network down there in Colombia, he said. I got tipped off that federal police, I should say it in his voice, I got tipped off that federal police were surveilling me, so I abruptly left the country. And, then he talks about how he was like geeking out on whatever he could put up his nose, Valium, Xanax, Loperidone, Ambien, hydrocodone, Oxycontin, Tramadol, whatever you can wash down to shut the brain down. And then he became like a major drug trafficker. And now he's back and he's like this Trump ally, CIA adjacent, #1 podcaster in America who somehow gets to finesse the manifesto of the Cybertruck bomber out to the public without providing the actual email or any metadata. And, they say we did a scrape on our email servers. It's not like you did we do a search. We search for emails, but they do a scrape on their servers. I'm telling you, like, what we've been talking about for the last hour and 15 minutes is how MAGA is going to be played to make Israel great again, bring in a new war on terror, and usher in a techno-feudal oligarchy. And that's why I wanted to talk about this with you, Patrick.
Yeah, and so this is the new mainstream. This CIA, but so their main audience is law enforcement, active duty military, veterans, and people who are in the kind of intelligence community or work in Washington, whatever. So it's got insiders, and that's a very effective social network if you want to inject information, which then gets fettered out through that network into society. Plus, they have the additional, millions in terms of subscribers. So if anything happens, they're going to, what they're doing is they're providing the road sign for the narrative, so that when events happen, the way that the intelligence community are planning for them to happen, that everybody is already moving on that stream. And what the really sad part about this is that I'm listening to people right after his last show that are emotional and traumatized, especially women, mothers, because they think that there's going to be an October 7th is coming to a town near you, or
school shooting. Hamas is going to do school shootings. Remember when the Hamas Day of Rage, and like Dan Bongino said he was going to go hide in his home in Florida.
Charlie Kirk, everybody was tweeting that out. The Day of Rage. Laura Loomer,
they're going to come get us. Hamas.
Hamas. But even Douglas McGregor got sucked into this, who I respect very much. He was saying Hamas got sleeper cells across Latin America. And I'm just trying to imagine what that's like while they're pinned down in Gaza, like how they could spare a battalion to be hanging out at a taco truck in Juarez or something like that, waiting for the call to get, it's just ridiculous. But this is the harnessing the QAnon level of analytical depth, which is what I think Sean Ryan's audience is. It's really lowest common denominator. That includes people who are in the service, by the way, who also fall for this sort of stuff. Even Michael Flynn was pushing QAnon memes and believed that Q was real. So this is basically, I think, is quite dangerous, because they're with Elon as well, and these people really injecting this clash of civilization, anti-Islamic narrative, that they could spin up the whole anti-Muslim stuff that we saw post 9/11 to an even higher degree in the United States. And that to me is unforgivable, considering what we and what the world has gone through since September 11th, what unmitigated disaster that's been for the Middle East, for Europe, and for the United States, North America, and everybody, not to mention how many rights we've lost and liberties we lost. And these are the people that will be calling for Patriot Act 3.0. These people. These people will be doing everything Edward Snowden risked his life to prevent. These people will be pushing it. Manpads. So what is the source of the manpads in Iran story? Nobody, there's no evidence. I heard it from a guy,
this evangelical pastor who Matt Shumat, or whatever his name is, works for.
Yeah.
He rolled it out in September. And if you listen to the Twitter live that Sean Ryan did after he went in hiding to avoid accountability for what he did before with the manifesto and the hidden email, he says, we only allow pros in here. We're not allowing just trolls. We're only allowing, and it's just a bunch of veterans and former contractors talking about how their buddies in this 3-letter agency told them about this or that threat, and it's coming down the pike. And that's all they do. And no one holds each other accountable because they're all in on the same grift. But it's very consequential, because you have a traumatized audience who are being told to call their congressman and freak out and impose a new war on terror. What did Matt Livelsberger, the supposed Cybertruck bomber, say about the drones? The public was never given an explanation. The New York Times, which said there are drones in the sky and no one knows what they are, they wrapped up their coverage by saying it was the product of mass hysteria. You're all just crazy. Go, move on. And the public was never given an explanation. Matt Livelsberger said they are Chinese, gravity drones. It's a secret project.
Anti-gravitational UFO tech run by China that are launched out of submarines off the coast of New Jersey.
So we're under attack by China. I mean, we might as well just go to war with them right now, as the U.S. is currently training Taiwanese special forces as we speak.
And better, the Chinese have been doing this for years.
Yeah.
That's what he said. So
they're letting them. Our government isn't doing enough.
Because Biden's weak, and he's allowing the Chinese to thumb their nose at us. I mean, this is just so like it's like Nickelodeon level sort of narrative, Starship Troopers level kind of propaganda. It's so pathetic. But these people are put themselves up, position themselves, their brand, as being this kind of serious insider podcast. But basically you have one spook talking to another spook about some alleged theory about something to do with UFOs and Chinese weather balloons. And it's just patently ridiculous. And all they're doing basically is feathering their nest for when the next false flag is engineered, or the next staged provocation somewhere in the world, or something that against U.S. interests, and then that hits the legal mechanism of the NDAA. Authorization for the use of military force kicks in, and next thing you know, there's a mass deployment, and we're in it. Basically, that's what happened after San Bernardino in December of 2015. That really strange, unlikely event out in the armpit of Southern California in the Inland Empire, that triggered the legal mechanism for the fight against ISIS, because ISIS had never attacked the United States. That is a very dubious event, by the way.
Which James Comey at the time said it doesn't make sense. And CNN was given a walkthrough of that apartment, of the shooter's apartment, just as the New York Post was given a walkthrough of this strange ISIS attacker's apartment in New Orleans. Aaron Mate, if you're ready to go, just raise your hand anytime, and we can get moving. But I think we are, once Trump enters office, or we're going to see an acceleration. I mean, when Sean Ryan says it's going to be a bloody 2025, it's almost like a wish, because they're going to guide the public towards one solution, which is,
these guys are also trading off of Benghazi, all of
Yep.
them. Okay. But none of them want to talk about the fact that two things, that they were trafficking weapons to Al-Qaeda in Syria, or the all the various groups, the Free Syrian Army, the Al-Nusra ostensibly, and they were directly responsible in the breakup of Libya as a failed state, which caused the migrant crisis in Europe. These are conservatives, right? They're trading off of the immigration issue. They're trading off of fighting terrorism. They themselves are actively involved in two of the biggest patent failures in U.S. Foreign policy history, but they won't talk about that on their podcasts. That is verboten conversation amongst the community.
No, you're not allowed to talk about the truth, the real truth of Benghazi. And Aaron, let me know if you're ready to go. Aaron, welcome. You have a hard stop at 4, or
no.
Okay,
no,
cool.
not a 4. No.
Okay, well, yeah, and Patrick, feel free to stay for the conversation. Or Benghazi, Sarah Adams, this CIA targeter that they bring on, talks about it as if it's just a scandal about U.S. security personnel being abandoned, kind of like the POW MIAs were abandoned in Vietnam. It's not about the bank shot where Gaddafi's arms were being sent to the Syrian so-called rebels by the CIA, and Chris Stevens was sent to Benghazi to do that and got caught in these highly unusual riots. No discussion of that. No discussion of how ISIS, the Islamic State in suits, came to power in Syria. I mean, it's shocking. The biggest scandal, I think, one of the biggest scandals we're witnessing is how the US, the entire West, and the NATO, along with Qatar and Turkey, which is in NATO, are welcoming this new government in Syria, which is the product of this whole dirty war. And you don't see anyone in the national security world freaking out about it at all. They're like, it didn't happen. And they're bringing Al-Qaeda members from Tajikistan, from Albania, and from Jordan into top-level defense ministry positions in Syria, along with Uyghurs.
And they're implementing Sharia law, which is something the right freak out about.
Yeah.
Oh, Sharia. They're actually done it in Syria just in the last 2 weeks. And it's not up for discussion on all these high-level, counterterrorism podcasts, which is kind of a joke.
Yeah, where are the Islamophobes? I rarely say, like, where are the Islamophobes? Oh, calling all Islamophobes. But I mean, it's like they have so much fodder right now if they wanted to, like, make a big deal about this. But it's because they're just a bunch of stooges for Israel. Look at the new justice minister in Syria. Confirmed, Syria's current interim minister of justice, Shadi al-Wais, appears in 2 videos from 2015 in which he oversees the public executions of 2 women accused of prostitution. This is like the Idlib Vice Squad. I can't play this because it's too graphic and we're probably already demonetized, but it's too graphic. But basically, the current minister of justice, who was elected by no one in Syria, came into power through a violent putsch. They sentence a woman to death, and then they just shoot her in the head with a pistol for alleged prostitution. These are de facto Turkish prostitutes for the Turkish MIT who are doing this. But this didn't even raise any alarm. It's not even being reported in US media. And Tommy Robinson, I mean, what's he talking about? Groomer gangs. So it's really shocking. Aaron, I don't know if you want to, if you get the same sense as we do, that the scandal of the Syrian dirty war's triumph is being kind of swept under the rug.
Yeah, of course it is. Of course it is. I mean, this was predicted, and this has been par for the course, to minimize or whitewash the sectarian nature of the insurgency that was supported from the start. And so it's just shocking to me that there's not more tact on the part of Jelani and his people, like to appoint a justice minister who's on video taking part in an execution of a woman for, as you said, adultery. They don't think through, what that might look like, but maybe they don't care. Maybe they realize that, their mission's been accomplished. They overthrew Assad, and they know that they'll have the backing of the U.S. and other foreign powers in what they do. So I suppose that doesn't matter to them. I mean, like, the sad thing is seeing people who bought into so much dirty war propaganda now acting surprised that this is what they cheered for. This is what they helped to usher in. And then the other people who've been appointed to positions, a lot of them aren't even Syrian. They come from foreign insurgencies that played a major role in the overthrow. There we go.
A Tajik foreign man has become a commander in the Syrian army. Yeah. This is a real victory for the Syrian people. By the way, this is Radio Free Europe's Tajik language publication. Saifuddin Tajibayev has been appointed to a high position in the Syrian Ministry of Defense. And he's wanted in Tajikistan on suspicion of participation in foreign wars and involvement in terrorist acts. And he's from Jamaat Tawhid Vajihad, which is sanctioned by the United States State Department and Treasury OFAC. Do you hear anything about this in U.S. media? It's like barely circulating on Twitter. Other top defense officials, again, include a Uyghur from Xinjiang from the Turkestan Islamic Party. And why would the U.S. actually oppose that when they're setting up basically a base in Syria for future attacks on China and Russia? I mean, look at here's Syrian, these Uyghurs in Syria. Hey, you bloody Chinese government. So you decided to oppress East Turkestan? The East Turkestan Mujahideen are firing these weapons. These are Grad missiles that they just captured from the Syrian military. They're not going to attack Israel. They're not going to defend Palestinians. So a new base has been established to attack China. I don't know what China's doing about this.
And this is why Mike Pompeo personally took them off the terror list, so they could be used for things like threatening China. I mean, why else would Mike Pompeo have done this? Did the East Turkestan movement suddenly reform itself and renounce terrorism? No, but Mike Pompeo saw them as being useful for the goal of weakening China, just as if they were useful for the goal of, bleeding Hezbollah and Iran and Russia inside Syria, which was, a major point of the whole dirty war to begin with.
So, yeah, I mean, you have freak out, Elon Musk, AstroTurf freak out about rape gangs in the UK. Meanwhile, on the shores of Syria in the Mediterranean, a boat captured by from the Wagner Group by Tawhid Vajihad from Tajikistan, which has just been granted a top-level position in the Syrian Defense Ministry. They're just like, I'm on a boat. I'm on a boat. They're just like having the time of their lives in the Mediterranean. This is not the Syrian people. These are not Syrians. These are guys from Tajikistan and Uzbekistan. And Aaron and Patrick, the U.S. just ended sanctions on Syria as these figures came into power.
They've put a waiver on the sanctions for 6 months. On some of them, by the way, not all of them. But what does that reflect? It reflects the awareness that these sanctions hurt ordinary civilians. That's who they were targeted at, contrary to propaganda. The aim of the sanctions was to basically make the people suffer enough, make the state collapse enough so that regime change can be achieved. And now that regime change has been achieved, they've lost their excuse to keep maintaining these sanctions and their excuse to keep pretending that these sanctions don't hurt the Syrian people. So the fact that these sanctions were waived is a recognition that they knew all along that these sanctions hurt the Syrian people, but it's only for 6 months. And the reason for that is they want to make sure that the new government falls in line and basically, stays within the bounds that the U.S. sets for them. And it's interesting. The new government of Syria, the new ministry, they just put out a statement basically saying that the sanctions hurt the Syrian people. I'll read it. We would like to highlight that the economic sanctions are still targeting the Syrian people, despite the fact that the reason for which they were imposed has been removed. So that's the new government acknowledging what we've been saying all along, which is that the sanctions target the Syrian people. And there's been this huge effort to pretend from dirty war apologists, no, they're only against the government of Syria. They only target Assad and his inner circle. It was always such a lie. And now the same people who are making that argument, while they were eviscerating ordinary Syrians, are now begging the U.S. to abandon these sanctions. You know, people like Josh Rogan of the Washington Post, these groups, these lobbyists in the U.S. that were instrumental in the passage of these sanctions, now they're all pleading for these sanctions to be waived. And Biden has just done that partially, you know, for 6 months, which he also did back after the earthquake of February 2023. That was another admission that these sanctions hurt ordinary people. But even back then, Biden's waiver was only temporary. And that it's the same thing now.
Patrick,
Yeah,
I thought these sanctions only hurt the Assad regime.
Far from it. Quite the opposite, in fact. And even people in the Syrian government would have told you, which they told Boutena Shaban told me, as Assad's advisor, that unfortunately the sanctions don't hurt us because we still need to go to work every day. We still need our security detail. We still need our driver because this country needs to function, is what she told us. And so she's up, whether they think or not, it will never hurt the government because the state needs to exist. The army needs to defend the borders and the roads, and the government needs to go to work every day. It hurts ordinary people, and it's collective punishment. And to me, it's the Caesar sanctions. That's based on a fraud.
Yep.
That's based on a fraud, and that will come out now. You'll start to see after, when it becomes safe, people who have already picked that apart, mainstream media and some enterprising award-winning journalists will get a hold of everybody else's work on it. Rick Sterling was a guy who did a great debunking of this. He's kind of an independent journalist from Berkeley, California. He even did very easily and swiftly debunked it, and other people have picked it apart. And that's going to be fair game now because it's done its job. Yeah.
And the supposed identity of Caesar was supposed to come out, and it's being reported that he's Caesar, his name is Osama Otman or Sami Otman. But then when you watch interviews with him, he actually says he's the double of Caesar, and that he was the person who was just handling Caesar. So we don't actually know who Caesar is. We haven't met him. There's nothing stopping him from revealing his identity. But the sanctions were pushed by the Syrian opposition in Washington, and they were authorized without the expectation that there would be regime change this December. And so they were, reenacted, and they have to give this waiver so the new Al-Qaeda Brooks Brothers regime can have an economy. Turkey and Qatar are bringing in energy stations to increase the energy output of Syria. All the walls around Syria that prevented it from functioning once Caesar went into effect in 2020, that would put Alina Duhan, the UN special rapporteur on sanctions, told you 80% of the population had been put below the poverty line by these sanctions and into food insecurity. That's all over, but there's no human rights or democracy. I mean, I think this is as discrediting to the rules-based order as the Gaza genocide has been, that they say democracy, human rights again and again and again. And then one of the most vicious, malign forces on the planet comes into power in Damascus. And then they just lift sanctions because they promise not to attack Israel and occupation U.S. troops.
And it's so cynical. It's just so cynical. This idea that one state far away has the right to basically impose a siege on a war-torn country that's already been decimated by a dirty war. And then some bureaucrats in Washington sign some forms and basically sentence, millions of Syrians to misery, raise their food prices. And they brag about it. I mean, I've quoted this a million times. Top Trump officials bragged about the fact that their sanctions exacerbated food and fuel shortages for everyday Syrians. And amazingly, some of them had the gall to pretend as if this was not what was happening. So while you had people like Andrew Tabler and James Jeffrey, who were top Trump officials for Syria, claiming that, bragging about the fact that these sanctions hurt ordinary Syrians, you people like Joel Rayburn, and let's watch this clip. If you click on it, let's watch this clip of Joel Rayburn claiming that all this is just Syrian government propaganda.
We believe that we should reevaluate our sanctions policies towards Syria. We'll just limit it to Syria right now. In light of the unintended effects that the sanctions appear to be having on everyday Syrians' food supply in areas controlled by the Assad regime. And I guess a follow-up to that is what specific steps is the administration taking to help alleviate the hunger crisis in Syria?
Thank you, Ms. Wild. So over the last, since the beginning of fiscal year 2020, the United States has actually spent $1.7 billion on humanitarian assistance to Syrian people. So we've stepped up our contribution. At the same time, we made very clear through our diplomatic engagements, our engagement with civil society and business communities, that there are specific carve-outs to our sanctions programs so that we do not constrain humanitarian assistance on the ground, nor things like food production. The Assad regime has undertaken, along with its allies, a propaganda campaign to claim that we do, but we've clarified at every opportunity that we don't sanction that kind of activity. The kind of people and businesses and organizations that we're sanctioning under our sanctions program right now are the worst of the entourage of Bashar al-Assad and his regime, and they're not doing anything. To the kind of people we're sanctioning, kind of organizations we're sanctioning, are not doing anything to alleviate suffering of the Syrian people. They're the ones causing the suffering of the Syrian people. So in particular, under the Caesar Act, the point of the Caesar Act is to put pressure on the regime so that they will stop killing and stop inducing the suffering of Syrians. So I think the regime's propaganda tries to put it absolutely upside down.
So if you click on the next image, if you just click on the right there, in the very next image after that video, in that tweet, you'll see what his own colleague said. So we just heard Joel Rayburn of the Trump administration say that the claim that the sanctions hurt the Syrian people is a propaganda campaign by the Syrian government. But this is Joel Rayburn's own colleague, Andrew Tabler, writing in Foreign Affairs. He says that U.S. sanctions have, quote, led to corresponding cuts in regime subsidies that have exacerbated fuel and food shortages for everyday Syrians. So basically, Joel Rayburn is accusing his own colleague of taking part in a Syrian government propaganda campaign, if he actually believes what he says, which is that the claim that the sanctions hurt the Syrian people is just Syrian government propaganda. That's his own colleague from the Trump administration acknowledging that, what he dismisses as propaganda. So anyway, it's just so cynical. You impose these sanctions, you hurt everyday Syrians, the damage is done, the state collapses, the government's overthrown, and then everything is lifted back to normal. And then if you're an average Syrian, and your choice is like continuing to suffer under these sanctions because of who your government is, like something you have no control over. Of course, you're going to welcome anything that's going to bring you relief. Of course, you're going to want to. You'd rather not live under sanctions than live under sanctions, than most people, because these sanctions mean starvation and suffering. But for those who are imposing the sanctions, it's just cynical, because it's basically saying that you're going to suffer until you have the government that we want.
There's another little lie that he told. You correct me if I'm wrong on this, but he said the U.S. has upped its humanitarian assistance to Syria. It's not Syria, the country, it's Idlib. All the U.S. aid earmarked for Syria during that time was going to Al-Qaeda occupied Idlib, if I'm not mistaken. That I just picked that up when he said that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. And because people wanting to work to conduct humanitarian operations inside government-controlled Syria, back when it was controlled by the Assad government, they had to get all these exemptions and waivers. It was very, very hard to get, and a lot of groups didn't get it.
And U.S. occupied northeastern Syria probably as well was recipient to some.
Yeah, of course.
And Al-Tanf, probably.
Well,
ISIS families, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, that's where they retrained the moderate rebels and reintegrated them into the whatever has poured forth onto Syria, or they sent them into the Syrian National Army managed by Turkey. But you have I briefly lost my train of thought. You have right now a rampage in the Homs countryside in Latakia against the Alawite population. We can't show you the videos now because I just try to avoid being demonetized by showing any violence. But these are gruesome videos. They don't just show the HTS, the new government, the supposed transitional government, which says it'll take 4 years to transition. This has suspended the constitution for at least 3 years, firing artillery on civilian neighborhoods in Alawite areas, but just torturing ordinary men who they accuse of being soldiers on camera gleefully. I mean, they're the ones filming it, just like Israeli soldiers. And this is sort of all being dismissed in US media, and not just US mainstream or corporate media, but on Democracy Now. Aaron, you flagged this Democracy Now segment where this reporter in Damascus, Lina Sinjab, or I don't know if she's a reporter, someone who returned there, is basically referring to the repression of Syrian religious minorities, and specifically the Alawite community, as kind of a necessary evil to root out the remnants of Assadism.
That, calling for these protests, it had a different agenda behind, because the Alawite community are worried about prosecution. Most of the Alawite community are, supportive of President Assad or former President Assad, and they had contributed or been part of the crackdown, the brutal crackdown on the Syrians, arrest, torture, imprison, and killing. So they will be prosecuted, and that's why they are, out and about trying to put pressure so there will be a general amnesty on the Alawite community. This is something that is impossible to happen, because the families of those who died in prison, the families of those who were bombed and, tortured to death or disappeared, they need justice. They need answers about what happened to their family members. And there's no way for peace and stability to happen in Syria without, a prosecution, without a legal system that will hold those who have blood on their hands accountable for the sake of reconciliation in the country.
So that's just straight up like incitement from Democracy Now! Against an entire, like 10 to 15% of the Syrian population, by the BBC's Middle East correspondent / MI6.
I mean, the fact that, first of all, a BBC correspondent is being given like a platform on Democracy Now. I worked there for a long time. Maybe I'm forgetting something. I don't recall us ever interviewing like state media employees, at least certainly not to the degree that Democracy Now does, and presents them as neutral, rather than the case of the BBC. This is a country whose government took part in the dirty war in Syria, spent a lot of money on it, and put out a lot of propaganda, including this, which is, as you said, is straight up sectarian incitement. She's saying that Alawites are complicit, basically, in crimes committed against the Syrians, which in itself is not only just tainting an entire minority group as a monolith and smearing them, but also painting Alawites as being separate from the Syrians, as if Alawites aren't Syrians themselves. And yes, Assad is Alawite, and certainly Alawites were put in positions of power inside the military, but that doesn't mean anything about the group itself, the millions of people inside Syria who are Alawite, who had nothing to do with the government. So yeah, and who now are understandably concerned because the people who are newly empowered are sectarian and committed atrocities against groups like the Alawites back during the dirty war, including in Latakia, where, according to Human Rights Watch, they carried out the systematic killings of Alawite families. And so all this is completely whitewashed in this clip, and worse, incitement is being promoted here. And in the next clip, it's just as bad, because in the next clip, the journalist says that essentially Alawites in Syria and Shia, and all the Shia, are all basically just in league with Iran. So that's the next clip, which we can pull up. And again, all this is being said with no pushback whatsoever. So if you're going to bring on this perspective, at least be prepared to, challenge it just a little bit if you feel compelled to air the platform like a BBC state and media employee. So let's hear this.
But I have to say the most feared one among people here is Iran and its affiliated militia, whether in Iraq or in Lebanon from Hezbollah or the Shiite militias in Iraq. They're worried about them interfering in the society, causing disruption and causing instability, especially that many of the Alawites and the Shia in Syria have always been affiliated to foreign powers like in Iran, and they are worried that this is going to continue.
Lina Sinjab, we thank you so much for being with us. Syrian journalist, BBC
Some serious
Middle East
pushback.
correspondent.
So she just said that the Shia and the Alawites of Syria are all affiliated with Iran. I mean, if Trump said something like that, Democracy Now! Would call that out for xenophobia and incitement. But because you're talking about Syria, where the dirty war entailed fueling a sectarian insurgency that's not taking power, people can just go on and incite hatred against entire groups, and that's considered totally normal. It doesn't occur that there should be some challenge there. So again, I don't think, I know the people at Democracy Now! Very well. I worked with them for a very long time. To me, it's a story about how easily people are duped here and how powerful the propaganda system is, that, independent shows can be enlisted in just putting out the most ridiculous material, including outright sectarian incitement. And it doesn't occur to them to challenge it. It's really illustrative of how the propaganda system works.
And a lot of them are having buyer's remorse. They've been calling for a regime change or dog whistling for it. Like Rami Jara is another one.
Yep.
He's freaking out. He said, this isn't what we wanted. This wasn't the revolution that we wanted. And, Joshua Landis, who I'm very critical of at the Quincy Institute from University of Oklahoma, because he kind of helped with that regime change narrative for years. And now he's like playing the neutral commentator on it, kind of thing. These people did so much damage to give backing to U.S. policy all these years, because that's effectively what academia did. This is what the mainstream media did. This is what all these Syrian activists in exile did. And now they're upset because they're like, oh my God, we didn't want ICE, we didn't want an Islamic State, parked in the Middle East, but you've got it. I
remember I did like this debate in like 2016. I would have been 1,000 times sharper now, but I just wanted to go before the professional sectarian left in Brooklyn and tell them how stupid and wrong they were. And it was at the Verso Loft. And it was like the dumbest debate, against like the most inane people. The moderator was completely biased, and everyone was there from the ISO, International PSYOP. I mean, they're international socialist organization, but they're basically like what like the Congress for Cultural Freedom in the 60s was, where like the CIA basically bought the left, and they were all screaming at me and calling me like a lover of dictators and so on. And it was like every blue-haired professional leftist who, believed in, polyamorous relationships and had tons of tattoos and, the most ridiculous hipster cartoons, woke to the extreme, all supported Jolani coming into power in Syria and imposing Sharia law, changing the schools, the curriculum to replace any reference to the Syrian state with Islam, basically deleting the Syrian state, deleting Syrian sovereignty. They all supported it, along with Democracy Now! And there was no pushback from within the activist left in the US at the time, or practically none. And our reputations were just constantly under attack. And now that I think we're vindicated, everything we said would come true is coming true, along with Israel seizing 40% of the Syrian water supply, vandalizing mosques in the south of Syria like they did in Lebanon and Gaza, abusing citizens, setting up checkpoints, and not one shot has been fired against them by Jolani's gangs. Everything we said has come true. Where's our vindication? Where are these people to just say they were wrong? They're nowhere. It's like they just move on to something else. A lot of it just doesn't even register.
A lot of our colleagues that we were kind of, shoulder to shoulder with this horrific genocide in Gaza for the last 15 months. Unfortunately, some of them I can't speak to at the moment because they were all in for, the Al-Qaeda takeover of Damascus. And to me, it's kind of like a geopolitical IQ test at this point. And this idea that Syria was somehow, not helping the Palestinians, and it's better that the Assad regime is gone and they didn't take any land back in the Golden Heights. Yeah. They didn't do anything. I mean, it's just really silly arguments, but very adolescent kind of approach to, and not real politic at all. And here it is staring you right in the face, the worst possible outcome. And not only that, it's carved a path to the Iranian border via Iraqi Kurdistan. and that's a path Israel will take. They can now do air-to-air refueling without U.S. help because there's Syrian airspace is a free-for-all at the moment. So it's like it's ridiculous. So all of the things that the worst possible outcomes are now very possible.
Yeah, and there's this triumphalism in Washington among supporters of the Biden foreign policy team because they feel like they broke the axis of resistance with this blow to the bridge, the land bridge between Iran and Lebanon, and the kind of confusion it's caused about the future in Iran. And you can watch Fareed Zakaria's mono before his final interview with Jake Sullivan, where he doesn't mention Gaza at all and just simply refers to Israel as kind of an effective proxy that hammered Hezbollah. I mean, it's also on the cover of Foreign Affairs, the journal of the Council on Foreign Relations. What is it? The strange triumph of a broken America. Like everything's polarized in the US. People aren't benefiting from the economy. Groceries are expensive, but the US is restoring its unipolar greatness. And it mentions the collapse of the Syrian state and what Israel has done to Hezbollah without mentioning the genocide in Gaza. That's the thinking of the establishment. But it was also the radical left that I knew, or the fake radical left, the professional activist, managerial class left that all worked at NGOs. They supported the same exact agenda as the people at the Council on Foreign Relations and in the National Security Council and in NATO. And here is the result. And there is some buyer's remorse, Patrick. You're right.
What do you think is going to happen now with the Trump administration coming in? Jared Kushner wants to revive the Abraham Accords again. I don't know if Saudi Arabia and them are having it, but I see very dark days for Palestine now. But so I'm very concerned actually of the direction this is going to go. A lot of talk of war with Iran. Mike Pompeo is doing the rounds, if you noticed, on all the shows. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Mike, they've appointed Pompeo's ex right hand, Morgan Ortagus.
Yeah.
Who's a war hawk and an arch Zionist as well. So that kind of, you've got a lot of Iran hawks circling like vultures around the White House at the moment.
Oh, and not just in the White House, also in Ottawa. I don't know if you saw Pierre Poilievre asked about Iran. If I can find the clip, here it is. This is pretty remarkable. The new incoming Tory or conservative leader of Canada was asked about striking Iranian nuclear facilities. And Aaron, Biden was presented by Jake Sullivan with options for striking Iranian nuclear facilities in recent weeks. This is something Trump said he may do. Here's the incoming Canadian Prime Minister.
Yesterday you said that you endorse Israel proactively defending itself by hitting Iran's nuclear sites, which is something that President Joe Biden does not endorse. Do you not feel like this could lead to a likelihood of an all-out conventional war between Iran and Israel? And do you not agree with Joe Biden and his assessment?
I think the idea of allowing a genocidal, theocratic, unstable dictatorship that is desperate to avoid being overthrown by its own people to develop nuclear weapons is about the most dangerous and irresponsible thing that the world could ever allow. And if Israel were to stop that genocidal, theocratic, unstable government from acquiring nuclear weapons, it would be a gift by the Jewish state to humanity.
I thought he was talking about Israel there for a moment, but I got a little confused.
Yeah, who's genocidal here again?
With nuclear weapons.
Well, Aaron, you come from that already annexed country, but it's been annexed apparently by Tel Aviv and not Washington.
Yeah, it does look like he will be the next Prime Minister of Canada after Justin Trudeau, the guy who went out of his way, of course, to support Israel, to back all of its propaganda used to justify the genocide and also gave a standing ovation to a Nazi war criminal. We can't forget that.
Yeah, that was.
This is the alternative, Pierre Poilievre. Yeah, again, everyone forgets in talking about Iran, by the way, that they don't have a nuclear weapons program. I mean, they're approaching the capability, but they're allowed the right to enrichment under the NPT. And again, there was an Iran nuclear deal. It was working. It was actually, it was working fine. It was Trump that chose to break it and Biden that chose to not return to it. And now their next big great idea is to bomb Iran. And I'm not surprised that Biden is mulling this over. I mean, why not? It's perfectly consistent with him. And the question for us is like, again, it's like, are we going to survive Biden's last few weeks in office? This, like, you know, to whatever extent he's still making decisions himself, or it's Jake Sullivan or Blinken, but it's perfectly in character for them to be considering this. Now, of course, you know, this has been going on for a long time where they say they're considering this kind of stuff. Will they actually follow through on it? The problem is with Biden, like, you never know. He's so out of it and such a committed warmonger that you really can't rule it out. And at this point, our best hope is Donald Trump's restraint. Like, we're counting on the restraint of Donald Trump, but that's where we're at.
And Aaron was obviously being sarcastic. If someone wants to, like, one of those like post left watch accounts wants to clip that out, there's not going to be restraint on Donald Trump's part, except that he may not want to get involved in an open-ended conflict at the beginning of his administration.
Yeah.
Which is why he's deploying the madman theory on Gaza and warning that all hell will break loose in Gaza if Hamas doesn't come to the table and do a deal. When Hamas hasn't been the rejectionist, obstructionist force, it's been Netanyahu all along. And with regime change in Syria, Netanyahu has more reason to want the hostages and captives, POWs, to remain in Gaza, because it keeps war on Iran and first with Yemen on the table. As soon as there's a ceasefire in Gaza, the Red Sea opens up. Yemen is no longer at war. There's no reason to return to conflict in Lebanon, and there's therefore no reason to go after Iran's nuclear facilities. So it's Netanyahu who wants the hostages there. Hamas has already put forward a list of 35 they're prepared to release, and they're like, whoa. Amazing.
Can I ask you both a question?
Yeah.
What does all hell breaking loose in Gaza look like at the moment? Like, what's that meant to look like?
Yeah, it's heaven there right now.
What are they going to do? Bomb the rubble?
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, they're bombing any structure left. Motassem Dalul, Gaza City-based journalist, just tweeted that he was living in a building in Gaza City's Al-Rimal neighborhood, which was one of the first neighborhoods wiped off the map by Israel back in October 2023. And he said 1,000 people are now in the streets because they started hitting the building with rockets, and now they're going to take the whole thing down. And the building is already like only semi-inhabitable. So they continue to do this. Meanwhile, the deceptions continue to crumble before our eyes, the deceptions that made this genocide possible. I wanted to kind of get this one out of the way since we've done so much work on this, Aaron and Patrick. I know you've covered this as well. The mass rape deception of October 7th has now been discredited again by none other than Moran Gez, who is an Israeli prosecutor who has acknowledged and this was in an interview with Ynet, the top or most popular Israeli publication, there are 0 complainants in alleged cases of rapes committed by Palestinians on October 7th, and no organized chains of evidence. This is Ali Abu Nima's report. Israel still can't find any October 7th rape victims. There's no testimony. There's no evidence. Anyone who entered Israel from Gaza on October 7th to kill or loot, it doesn't matter. They should be included in the indictment and receive the death penalty. Those who didn't murder but looted, burned, stole, picked avocados, as some claim, because of this mess. You came to the door with a drill and opened it to loot. Then a terrorist came in and murdered civilians there, so they should all be put to death. So she's basically saying, forget about pursuing rapists or those who committed sexual assault. We can't find any. But if you came into Israel to pick avocados or take selfies or whatever, you're all going to get the death penalty. There goes the whole deception out the window. that we had been calling out since December 2023 when it was first introduced.
Well, that's what happens when you stage a propaganda campaign. You initially get some buy-in from a reliable media that goes along with it. We saw that with the beheaded babies lie. But then the beheaded babies lie is hard to sustain, because eventually, if you're going to put out that light, you have to show something for it, like the corpse of a beheaded baby, which of course didn't exist because it was a lie. In this case, it's a lot easier to claim that there was this like campaign of mass rape by Hamas, because you can hide behind the fact that rape victims are not going to be wanting to come forward and talk about it. And also, as they claimed, a lot of the victims were killed. But then the problem with that is, eventually it had to come out that there was no forensic evidence for any of this. No autopsy showed any evidence of such rape. There was no video footage, and all they had was, singularly, all they had was the claims of people claiming to be witnesses. But if you subjected all those claims to a moment's scrutiny, as we did, they all just were lying. It didn't help them that some of their so-called witnesses were people from groups like Zaka, which helped spread the original beheaded babies lie and other acts of atrocity propaganda. But in this case, that narrative was so important because it was so foundational to the propaganda campaign for genocide that it stood for a while, and it still stands in U.S. media where there's not been a debunking at all, at least outside of groups of outlets like the Grayzone and Electronic Intifada. But eventually, stuff like this has to happen. It's just, but what? We're more than a year now since they started putting. I remember it was about a year ago, Max, that we were deep in this, challenging that New York Times story that came out just about a year ago. But of course, it's long after the damage has been done.
So now they can kind of just say, it didn't. We don't have any evidence, but it did the thing. Yeah. We slipped it into every speech and every talking point Kamala Harris made on the campaign about October 7th, as well as Donald Trump's people. I mean, it's just, we successfully implicated Palestinians as rapists who need to be caged forever.
Yeah.
Tony Blinken repeated it again and again and again. And now they just admit game over. But they're going to keep pushing it. What they won't do, though, is allow Pramila Patten, UN special rapporteur on sexual violence, to go to Israel and investigate the rape gangs in the Israeli military that were carrying out rapes on camera in the Sde Teman concentration camp against Palestinians, including Palestinian medical professionals, political prisoners, innocent people. You never will hear about this in U.S. media. There were pro-rape riots across Israel.
Yeah.
Where's Tommy Robinson? He's part of those riots.
Mobs protesting for the right to rape, if you can believe that. I mean, it's just barbaric in the extreme. But it is along that same theme, which is the Muslim rape of white European society. It's the same type of thread that they're using. Tommy Robinson and Jordan Peterson was trying to amplify on the Piers Morgan show this week, where he made a complete fool out of himself, as he normally does. But he really went over the top on this the rape of Britain. So Jordan Peterson made it sound like there's gangs of Muslim rape gangs marauding through Britain right now. I'm in Britain now, and it's a very quaint, quiet, generally peaceful country, very safe. London's one of the safest cities in the world. You can walk around. It's not that dangerous, not compared to some other cities I've been to. But this characterization that is funny, I think it was Loki who had a person who's an expert on this subject, and she said something very important. When it's a white perpetrator, they focus on the individual. When it's someone who's not a white perpetrator, they collectivize the crime, and that's how you create the culture wars, basically. Yeah.
Rape gangs are taking over England. Where are the men to stand up to this?
Is that Kermit the Frog or George Peterson or Jordan Peterson?
It's my attempt at Jordan Peterson.
Jordan Peterson.
I dare you to watch that.
We need Jerusalem. We need Israel.
You need to get a suit, Max, that's like red on one side, blue on the other. Do this sort of Jekyll and Hyde type tailored suit.
Yeah. So I look like I'm selling something for 1995 and like a old school infomercial.
You're pretty good on that, JP, and that's pretty good. You're getting good on that.
Yeah, we're working on my Ben Shapiro. I gotta get a black keep on. We're gonna make Canada a 50-verse state, man. We're gonna take Elon Musk to Auschwitz. I got to work on my Ben Shapiro, but yeah. So again, vindicated with no recognition. And the sickening thing is the New York Times that spun out this mass rape deception implicating Palestinians in order to sell Israel's genocide is now actually benefiting from Israel's torture camps to justify Israel's destruction of the Kamal Adwan Hospital in northern Gaza, the last functioning medical facility in northern Gaza, whose director is now in the State Timon concentration camp. Why was Israel just burning this hospital, arresting all the medical patients, forcing patients out? Well, the New York Times wants you to hear Israel's side of the story. And it's that in Israeli video, detainee says Hamas operates out of Gaza hospital. There's the medical director who has been detained for trying to save lives, but also for maintaining steadfastness as Israel seeks to remove all centers for life in northern Gaza, because the real agenda is to ethnically cleanse and annex northern Gaza and place settlers there. It's not about stopping Hamas. How do they know that this, how can we trust what this detainee says? The military released footage of what it said was an interrogation of one of more than 240 militants it had arrested, saying it backed up Israel's allegations that Hamas and other armed groups deliberately embed themselves in hospitals in violation of international law. They're human shields. The New York Times wasn't able to independently verify the claims or determine the circumstances. And then they mentioned that Israel's detained many Gazans in State Timon, where many have been held in demeaning conditions, and they describe beatings and other abuse, like rape, which has been documented on camera, but they don't mention that, with electrified rods. The Israeli military has denied accusations, but it's on camera. So basically, a detainee from this hospital was tortured into a coerced confession, and now it's a New York Times headline. This is a violation of the Geneva Conventions and any standard of journalistic ethics to rely on confessions that were coerced through obvious torture. And the New York Times does it anyway because they're so desperate to prove Israel's side of the story to justify its destruction of a hospital. Would they have done this with a Ukrainian hospital destroyed by Russia? I mean, come on.
I mean, if they're going to cover the story, what the headline should be something like, Palestinian prisoner makes claim in Israeli prison known for torture. That's the actual story is they're putting out claims that serve their propaganda narratives, in detention, which is in conditions which everyone knows are basically prone to torture. I mean, that's what Israel does. Everyone knows that. So basically what the Times is doing is putting out an Israeli press release. And then of course, at the bottom, they bury that they couldn't independently verify the claims. And yeah, it's known that they are subjected to demeaning conditions. But by the way, they don't even use the word torture for obvious reasons, is because once you say it outright, then it just invalidates the entire article, which they can't do.
They were demeaned, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Didn't Grayzone, didn't you report on the father and the son that created that rape story and it ended up falling apart? I think Grayzone did it.
I mean, we had to.
Israel created the rape story and then forced a father and son to repeat it under torture. Yeah,
under duress. Basically.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
We methodically picked it apart just to show that there was no possible way, based on all thousands of hours of footage available from October 7th, that it could have been possible. There was no forensic evidence. And they were, just imagine what the torture consists of, aside from enormous amounts of physical pain and deprivation. They tell you that we know where your family lives. Here's a picture of their house, and we're going to bomb them and kill them all unless you say that you and your dad went out and raped a woman, an innocent woman, together. You're savages. That's what they do. And they kill so many people so randomly that we just kind of stop thinking about how they're doing the targeting, how they justify it. And then Hamas operates out of the hospitals. Well, Hamas was the government. They have government officials. They have people in the Ministry of Health who are still there, who are trying to keep some semblance of civilization, of order. And the U.S. has given Israel carte blanche to kill them. I'm in the DC area. Are there Democrats in the hospital? Because the Democratic Party has just overseen this genocide. So would that, if Tony Blinken goes to a hospital to get like a prostate exam, would that justify Palestinians bombing that hospital? I mean, by that logic that they're putting forward, yes. And Israel, I mean, what did we see when Iran attacked Israel in retaliation for Israeli attacks on Iran? Jim Sciutto, former State Department official who's now a CNN reporter, goes on air and says that the Mossad headquarters is honeycombed among Israeli civilians, and Iran has attacked it to try to claim that Iran was harming civilians. Well, what do they? Who are those civilians now? Human shields? No, the only time Palestinians can be human is if they're human shields, according to the U.S. media. The New York Times, it needs to be like, I would be fine with Elon Musk buying it and just and then selling it off to like BlackRock or something. It needs to be done away with.
If Elon buys the New York Times, he'll write the front page story every day. It'll be with his byline, because that's what he likes doing.
Yeah, it'll be it'll be Mario Nafal's like writing with Elon Musk's byline.
A story about Elon by Mario.
Yeah.
Probably.
About how to perfect the human race through Elon's sperm and naming kids after quadratic formulas, only having children through IVF because that's family values. We're going off on a tangent. I want to do one more segment if we can, Aaron and Patrick, on Tony Blinken's final interview. Can we do that?
Yeah.
This is horrific.
Okay, let me pull that up. I mean, we're missing the final Biden crimes, giving medals to, we're skipping medals to Bono, Hillary Clinton, George Soros, Jose Andres. Bono, by the way, being most famous for sketching the Atlantic cover of Vladimir Zelensky. And giving medal to Liz Cheney. And I think in one of the biggest insults to the American public after giving $8 billion to Israel in a final arms sale paid for by us. I think the biggest insult of the Biden administration to the American public was this. He met with David Pakman. This is worse than the hair sniffing. This is worse than almost anything he's done.
This is worse than having Idi Amin in the Oval Office for like a medal ceremony or something. This is really bad, but it's only fitting. It's only fitting because Joe's just barely hanging on for dear life there.
Yeah, no, this is another iconic image of, I guess, the end of the kind of neoliberal era.
But you know what? The irony of this is David probably didn't get any extra subs as a result of this photo. That's the sad part.
He lost half of them as a result of selling people on the fantasy of Kamala winning. I don't know if like Sam Cedar was waiting in line there, but man, I forgot about all those guys. Anyway, just thought I'd throw that in there for fun. Before we get back into the grim stuff, where's the Blinken interview? Here it is. Tony Blinken. I mean, look at the graphic that the New York Times created for this interview. How disturbing is this?
Oh, Jesus.
He's just kind of like there, and he looks kind of like personable. He looks like a kind and decent man.
I don't know about that. Maybe a mafia consigliere or something.
Or he looks like he's about to interrogate you and kiss you, and then you're gonna Clemenza's going to come in and strangle you to death. And he may be speaking to you in French because quiet as kept. Tony Blinken grew up in Paris and is a Frenchman.
Yep.
The interview starts off with him being asked some pretty softball questions by his interviewer, who is Lulu Garcia Navarro. And Blinken is kind of whining about how Trump left them a disaster and they tried to get through it. But then she starts actually respectfully grilling him on Gaza. And I'm scrolling down to that section. Here we are. And she reads off the death toll to Tony Blinken. And I mean, 45,000, which is actually very conservative. It's at least 60,000 now. Almost 90% of Gaza's population is now displaced, consistent with characteristics of gen. Go ahead.
I have the clip if you want to watch the clip.
Yeah, let's do that.
Do you, Secretary Blinken, worry that perhaps you have been presiding over what the world will see as a genocide?
No, it's not.
How many seconds was that in between the question and the answer? If you're asked, are you presiding over a genocide, and you're not, that should be a pretty quick response. No, I'm not. But it took him like, I don't know, 2 or 3 seconds to say no, which I think is pretty damning in itself, along with the rest of the answer.
Yeah.
And then he goes,
play the rest of that answer.
Yes. So, and now you'll hear him even deny, of course, that it is a genocide.
No, it's not, first of all. Second, as to how the world sees it, I can't fully answer to that. But everyone has to look at the facts and draw their own conclusions from those facts. And my conclusions are clear.
Do you, Secretary Blinken, worry?
Yeah. So anyway, what a non-answer. Like everyone, it's very vague. Everyone's look at the facts and draw their own conclusions, but I've looked at them and no. I mean, he can't actually make a defense. It's not a genocide because he knows that it is. And he knows that he's speaking of drawing your own conclusions, he took his own experts' conclusions and he lied about them. He went before Congress and falsely claimed that Israel's not blocking humanitarian aid when his own experts had told him that Israel is doing exactly that. So this appeal to looking at the facts and drawing your own conclusions. I mean, he's someone who doesn't practice what he preaches because he explicitly lied and concealed that his own experts had warned him that Israel is blocking humanitarian aid as part of a genocide.
And here's more from Tony. Well, actually, on the topic of genocide, days after that interview came out, Tony Blinken declares that the RSF paramilitary and its allied militias in Sudan have committed genocide, costing tens of thousands of lives in less than 2 years. Look, I know horrific things have happened in Sudan and the RSF militia has killed many, many people. But do we have the same level of evidence relating to intent to commit genocide as we have from the Israeli government? 8 members of Knesset, including from the ruling Likud party, MK Ariel Kalner, just introduced a resolution to allow Israel to starve the Gaza population, prevent water from entering. I mean, it's all there. It's all, these are like future exhibitions in the Gaza Holocaust Memorial Museum that are being pumped out by the Israeli Knesset, the Israeli government every day. And Tony Blinken denies that it's a genocide. Why? Because number one, he's responsible for it. And number two, they're Jewish. And he just can't allow that to take place as the son-in-law and grandson of Israel lobbyists. Then you have Tony Blinken recounting all of the valiant efforts that he made in his interview to stop this non-genocide. And this is so telling, this section. He said, the very first trip that I made to Israel 5 days after October 7th, I spent with my team 9 hours in the IDF's headquarters in Tel Aviv, Hakiria, 6 stories underground with the Israeli government, including the prime minister, including arguing for hours on end about the basic proposition that the humanitarian assistance needed to get to Palestinians in Gaza. And that was an argument that took place because you had in Israel in the days after October 7th, a totally traumatized society. This wasn't just the prime minister or a given leader in Israel. This was an entire society that didn't want any assistance getting to a single Palestinian in Gaza. I argued that for 9 hours. So there's so many layers here. But first, he's acknowledging all of Israel is genocidal while denying there's a genocide. They're allowed to be genocidal because they're traumatized. Do you ever hear him talk about Palestinians in that way, calling them traumatized people who've been under occupation for 70 years, who've been ethnically cleansed, who are living in an open air prison camp behind electrified walls with machine guns on their towers? No. And what is he doing arguing with the leaders of a country that has like 7 or 8 million citizens, or maybe 10 million citizens, many of them living around the world, when you are the Secretary of State of the most powerful country in human history, and you're arguing with them, please, can you allow some water bottles in there and some diapers? Like, I would just love if you would if you would do that, I'll give you so many bombs. You're going to get you're going to have the biggest bombs. You're going to drop them on so many Palestinians, but why doesn't he use the point of leverage that would actually force them to do that, or would have forced a hostage deal immediately that would have spared all the killing? Because he can't. That exposes him. This whole passage exposes Tony Blinken as a gigantic fraud and not a diplomat. The diplomat would have used leverage, the diplomat of a powerful country like and he's never once used that leverage.
The worst part is he made that statement that I tried, but I argued for hours, and of course it was a utter failure. But he's trying to get the crowd, the public on his side, to view him as a compassionate person, when in fact he's presiding over the worst slaughter imaginable. So he has all the traits of maybe get Jordan Peterson in for the psychoanalysis, but a covert narcissist or something like that. But Blinken is just very manipulative in his demeanor and how he sort of positions himself. Yeah. And he's not going to be able to escape history. He'll get a worse treatment than Henry Kissinger, I predict, for the Gen Zers.
Inshallah. Aaron, what's Tony Blinken's next act going to be? What do you predict?
Well, before he joined the Biden administration, he was at what they called West Exec Advisors, a consulting firm profiting over global misery of the variety that he now spreads. And also he was a columnist at the New York Times. He would write regular pieces for the New York Times, including, I remember he wrote one basically throwing Obama under the bus because, who Blinken served under, because Obama wouldn't send the level of weapons to Ukraine that Blinken wanted. So Blinken was doing things like throwing his own former boss under the bus for not being enough of a warmonger. So I suspect he'll return to that line of work, profiting off of death and misery, and then writing think pieces for liberal audiences to justify it.
Do you think he'll launch a podcast, one-on-one with Tony?
I think that's a fair bet. Yes, I do.
Possible. Maybe he'll have a Patreon page to give guitar lessons.
Oh.
Be jamming with Neil Young and all his idols.
He's already extremely wealthy. A lot of it's inherited. I drive by his house sometimes. I was kind of peripherally around Kibbutz Blinken, the protest movement outside his home. It's an enormous mansion overlooking the Potomac on Chainbridge Road, and it's 5 minutes down the road from the CIA, from Langley. And Patrick, you mentioned how the Tesla is a status symbol inside the Beltway. When you drive by the CIA, you just on a work day, you see like an endless line of Teslas with Ukraine flags on them. Just like it's the whole research department, and they're all Democrats. Then Blinken's like right down the road. And across the street from him is a house that's been on the market. It's like $40 million for sale. He has enormous amounts of money. So I think he may go into like a teaching position at Harvard. That's what Hillary did at Columbia. And the students who made Hillary's life uncomfortable at Columbia deserve enormous amounts of respect because they won't allow this to be normalized. And Tony Blinken should not be allowed to have a moment of peace once he leaves the administration. We can't forget what he did. Any institution he enters should be considered poisoned and fundamentally toxic because he is a soft-handed, sociopathic, war criminal on par with the worst criminals in history for what he's done in Gaza. Because again, could have ended it with one phone call. He could have done it. And he constantly claims Biden was in charge of everything. Come on. And Biden considers Tony Blinken kind of like a surrogate son, like, the son he wished Hunter Biden had been. So Tony Blinken had enormous amounts of leverage with Biden as well. These figures, I mean, how long does it have to go on for? Like, what is the objective? And what has Israel gotten, really? I mean, they've destroyed Gaza. They're still getting attacked from the rear by Al-Qassam and Palestinian Islamic Jihad fighters. They haven't stamped them out. There's a new article in Jerusalem Post claiming Hamas has replenished its ranks and now has 23,000 fighters, faster than they've been eliminated. That Netanyahu's numbers are all off. You can see videos of operations every day. And Israel is the pariah state it deserves to be, and they still have their hostages there. This is also a strategic failure on the part of Blinken, who claimed coming into office that he cared so much about Israel and that he was there to save them and push a two-state solution. So, not in addition to being just from a moral perspective, a massive criminal and a villain of history, strategically and diplomatically, he's a failure, which is something that I think distinguishes him from Kissinger, who left the Nixon administration with the triumph of Nixon going to China and the Sino-Soviet split. No matter what,
he could follow the footsteps of Tony Blair, who's a equally despicable type of character. But Tony Blair carved out a Middle East envoy kind of career for a good decade with Tony Blair and Associates, took over the whole 7th floor of the King David Hotel or something, or one of those in Jerusalem. And he set himself up as the kind of middleman for everything. And I think Blinken might attempt something like this. I just have a suspicion looking at the type of person he is.
Yeah, and I mean, the normalization between Israel and the Saudis and the UAE gives him the contacts he needs to become a middleman and to rake in tons of contracts the way Tony Blinken did, where I think it was at the American Colony Hotel. Tony Blair did. He was at the American Colony Hotel in East Jerusalem, and he was a lobbyist for JP Morgan, and then he would bring in the contract for the UAE to take over the Palestinian telecom company like Al Watan, and then he would get all the kickbacks behind the guise of trying to negotiate peace with this massive staff there. That's a good guess, but it'll be fascinating and outrageous to see what the Biden people do after they leave office. Also, Samantha Power, one of the biggest moral frauds of the administration.
She's at Harvard.
Yep. She'll go back to Harvard, Kennedy School. Poisonous institutions. And Trump and his team will manage to make them look like the adults in the room after he's done. That's my prediction. Aaron, me and Patrick were talking a lot about what we expect from the Trump administration. Any thoughts before we go on what we have to look forward to?
Just as we're talking about Blinken and his plans and the incoming circle around Trump, I'm just reminded of what Hannibal of the A-Team said in the A-Team's last episode. He said, why there's a world of slime balls out there. And that's all I could think of right now is there's a lot of slime balls in both parties. And they're in charge.
And where is B.A. Baracus when we need him?
Who's the B.A. Baracus of this team?
Great question.
Sebastian Gorka.
Sebastian Gorka, he poses for photos of it by his bookshelf, and there's like he always has a James Bond book, a book about Bond facing the camera, as if to say, yes, I am an MI6 agent too. But yeah, there's no, where's the A team to save us? It's a world of slime bags. I wish I could end with the A team theme.
They'll all be selling reverse mortgages on Newsmax ads. Empty out the liquidity. What's left in your home? I'm Sebastian Gorka.
Shout out to Matt Gates, whose wife is the sister, by the way, of what's his name, Palmer Luckey, who is the head of Anduril, part of the AI tech cartel that is going to get zillions in Pentagon contracts through the new administration. That's a story we should cover in the future.
That's the no-go area for Doge. They're not allowed to touch any of that.
Don't touch that. That's our economy. But Patrick, thank you. I mean, that was amazing. And thank you for being so generous with your time. You did a fantastic job breaking down all these complex topics and staying with us for the full 2 or 2.5 hours. Aaron, thanks as always. And thank you for subscribing to the Grayzone, supporting us in any way you can, including by liking this stream, which is always suppressed by YouTube. And we're going to be launching our Substack site next week. It's already up, but we'll be launching it officially next week, so you can get more multimedia content. We're not going to paywall. Nothing's going to be paywalled there. You don't have to do any. You don't have to contribute anything to read it. But it's just a new part of our arsenal at the Grayzone. Make sure to also follow us at Rumble. And again, thanks for joining. Thanks again, Patrick and Aaron. And we'll see you all next week. Peace.